Planet B
presents
Cult and Culture Podcast.
What you're about to hear is Martin Atkins of Public Image Limited, Ministry, 9 Inch Nails, and Killing Joke, interviewing myself on February 28th at the SAE Institute of Chicago. It was part of a lecture and Q&A on music and the world surrounding it, and this is a segment from that discussion.
You're listening to all of that stuff, the West Coast skate punk?
But I mean, the Thrasher stuff was like, because I really was sold on Septic Death, which is Pusshead. He's saying that Pusshead did a lot of art for Metallica and Misfits and stuff. So that was kind of like the main thing. But they're from Ohio, so or from Idaho. I mean, but yeah, so it's kind of like all over. It wasn't like a coastal thing because I grew up in Phoenix and I was already into like skateboarding culture, at like age 9 or 10. And so it was kind of like this started to happen. And once I hit 12, I was like, this is it. Convinced my mom to buy me a bass, and then when I was 15, started my first band, which was called Struggle, and went on tour before my 16th birthday. I'd already toured the West Coast. I went to Canada. Crazy stuff. Like a 15-year-old probably shouldn't have left the country. I played in Mexico and Canada before I turned 16.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't. I don't think you can't do that. So how was it?
It's awesome.
Who was driving?
Well, so one of the guitar player was
driving.
Yeah, the guitar player and the drummer were both 16, and me and the singer were 15. So 16, you had a driver's license, but it was wild. I mean, but we had no expectations, and I think so that was 90, I believe. At that point, like it was different. There wasn't like in America there wasn't like this sort of like stronghold by the government to figure out like, oh, we have, you could cross the border and they're just like, oh, whatever. Like, even like you have mohawks and green hair and dreadlocks and shit. Go ahead. Like it didn't matter. Like now it's like, what are you? You have drugs, your guns, contraband, whatever. Like there's something to it. But they were just letting us go, and it was in retrospect, it was absurd, and I don't know how it worked, but it did.
I just had a similar experience, and sometimes I love the internet. Sometimes I just think it's some ridiculous joke, but. The bass player in a band I had in 1980 was describing our first trip to America, not with Pill, with this punk thing I had. And we went to the all-night cinema in Leicester Square. I don't know why. It was £5 for 5 movies. And we thought we'd be watching movies and doing Speed, of course. But all the homeless people are in there just biting. And of course, it's kung fu movies, which is just winding everybody up. Starting fights with people who £5 was a reasonable deal to be warm for the night. So we're in amongst that, and I was trying to imagine myself, what was I thinking? And I came to the conclusion maybe I wasn't. It never occurred to me that it was insane. Like Times Square in 1980 was fucking dangerous shit.
Sure.
People were just getting shot in New York back then. So you just jump in a van and go to Mexico and Canada.
So the thing is though, that like you or I in our lives being young, doing that, doing these dangerous things or impractical things or whatever came out in the music though. Like that was what created the art. Essentially, I feel.
Well, there was that disregard. It wasn't like I have decided to not give a shit. We didn't even know there was a shit to be given.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point.
Like immigration, I guess we were speeding and drunk arriving in America.
That's the best way to arrive.
What were we doing? Okay, so you start touring. So you talked about how it was when you started. I'm going to dot all over the place. How is it different now? What are the things that are different and useful, and what are the things that are different and shit?
Well, obviously, as you've been talking about, the internet is a huge thing that's changed the game. So for me, it was pre-internet, and for me to go and book a tour, I don't have income. We didn't have like a real record label. We were on this label called Ebullition, which was a big deal for us, a big deal for punks, and especially in the mid '90s. It was a rad label to be on. it was part of this community. And that was, again, going back to the ethics, you were creating this thing. You're like, oh, you're part of Ebullition and all these other bands that are kind of affiliated. And Ebullition would do things like put out compilations with Bikini Kill, which had Kathleen Hanna, and, you know, and you know, like kind of touching upon like what would become bigger musical entities, you know, or people of the musical world. So, but you know, being part of this label was a thing. But we would try to figure out how are we going to book a tour. You know, for one, we don't have money to call. But there was like a publication called Book Your Own Fucking Life, and it was basically just like a magazine you could look through, and you could look in every city, and you could book a show. And of course, you're kind of screwed because you're like, hey, will you book us? And they're like, yes. But then you don't have any control of like, are they going to promote it? So you just go there and you're like, fuck, I hope there's like at least 3 or 5 people there, you know, like a couple people will be fine. And so you know, you really didn't have any expectations because I wasn't just planning on going and doing something grand. I was just like, let's just go play, and if we could sell a few records and make gas money and find a house to sleep on someone's floor at, done. You know, that's like well, that's all we were hoping for, you know. But we would there was like this whole network of weird ways, like. Not that I was stealing our gear, because we didn't really steal our gear, but we just stole a lot of other things. I mean, we were poor, we were punk, and we were practical. We were street smart, so we were practical in this one sense where we would say like, you know, oh, there's these Coke machines where you could squirt salt water in the Coke machine, all the money would come out, and all the soda would come out. Like, cool, let's do that every day, everywhere we go. And then you go like, oh, we have gas money, and we have money to eat, and we have a ton of soda, and it's free, you know. And so we use all that money for things like gear and things like that. But you could also, then it got even crazier because once you start networking with all the other punks, you figure out there's these things called dialers at Radio Shack, and you get this chip and you change it, and I don't even know what dialers are actually meant for, but you basically go to a payphone, you put it in, and it sounds like the sound of quarters going in, so you could call anywhere. So we were booking tours for free, because this is before cell phones, and then eventually we were like, oh, we can book tours in Europe, and we can call Europe and do this. So it got like absurd, and we started going everywhere for free. So it was stolen, but not the actual gear, because there was ethics involved. You know, like I don't really care about stealing from Coca-Cola, but I would not rob someone and take their gear or
right.
whatever.
Right, I get it.
Planet B.